Moving day is supposed to be chaos you control, not a trial run for neighborhood politics. But the moment my truck rolled past the last stop sign, a woman in a blazer marched into the street and pointed like she owned the asphalt. She shouted, "Follow our rules!" before I even cut the engine, and every box in my bed suddenly felt heavier. I had just bought this place, keys warm in my pocket, optimism high, and somehow I was already on trial. She introduced herself without a smile, rattling off parking restrictions, paint colors, trash schedules, and fines like bullets. She said the letters HOA as if they were a badge and a threat, and she demanded my paperwork. Neighbors peeked from porches. Movers froze. I felt the familiar pressure to apologize just to keep things moving, but something in her certainty felt off. I asked calmly which HOA she meant. She frowned, repeated herself louder, and told me everyone here answers to the association. I nodded, thanked her, and kept unloading. That's when she snapped. She said she would call enforcement, tow my truck, and delay my move indefinitely. She promised consequences. Here's the thing she didn't know yet. I had read every page of my closing documents twice. I had checked the plat maps, the disclosures, the exceptions, and the easements. I knew exactly where my lot began and ended. I knew who governed it, and it wasn't her clipboard club. As the sun climbed, she hovered, narrating violations into her phone. I let her. I focused on carrying boxes, meeting neighbors, and breathing through the tension. Each accusation sharpened my resolve. This wasn't about paint or parking. It was about power, and she assumed I didn't have any. By afternoon, she cornered me again and demanded compliance. I smiled, told her I appreciated her concern, and said I'd be happy to discuss it once my attorney returned my call. The word attorney changed the air. She scoffed, but uncertainty flickered. That night, surrounded by boxes, I pulled out a folder I'd prepared for a moment exactly like this. The proof was clean, boring, and devastating. Tomorrow, I would show her that shouting rules doesn't make them real. I slept lightly, replaying her certainty and my silence, knowing morning would bring confrontation. Yet beneath the nerves was calm, because facts don't shout. They wait. I organized emails, highlighted clauses, and set copies by the door. When dawn came, the street looked ordinary again, but I wasn't. I was ready to finish the conversation she started, quietly, decisively, and on my own terms. Nothing she could threaten would outweigh documented truth, ownership boundaries, and patience earned through preparation and quiet confidence. Morning arrived with the soft clatter of another moving truck and the sharp tap of heels on concrete. She was back before my coffee finished brewing, clipboard tucked under her arm like armor. Without greeting me, she announced a violation for overnight street parking and warned that fines would begin immediately. I listened, nodded, and asked her to wait one moment while I grabbed something from inside. When I returned, I didn't bring attitude. I brought paper. I handed her a copy of my deed summary, the plat map, and the disclosure page that mattered most. She waved them away and said, HOA authority. Didn't come from random documents. That's when I gently pointed to the county seal, the recorded instrument number, and the highlighted line stating my parcel was excluded from association governance. She paused, frowned, and said exclusions didn't work that way. According to her, the neighborhood voted years ago to include everyone. I asked for the amendment. She said it existed. I asked for the recording reference. She said she didn't have it with her. I asked which statute allowed retroactive inclusion without consent. She raised her voice. Neighbors gathered again, this time closer. A man across the street asked what was happening. She declared she was enforcing community standards. I replied calmly that she had no jurisdiction over my property. I showed him the map. He leaned in, read it, and nodded slowly. Others followed. Murmurs replaced certainty. She tried a new tactic, saying that even if I wasn't technically in the HOA, I still had to respect neighborhood rules. I agreed, saying I respected laws and property rights. Rules require authority. Authority requires consent or statute. I had neither. Her smile thinned. She threatened to call the management company. I offered to dial for her. She threatened to call the city. I welcomed code enforcement. She threatened towing. I explained towing a vehicle from private property without authority was unlawful. Each threat landed softer than the last. Finally, she accused me of being difficult on purpose. I told her the truth. I prepared because misunderstandings happen, and clarity prevents conflict. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to end it. She stepped back, scanning faces that no longer nodded along. The clipboard drooped. She said she'd look into it and retreated to her car, phone pressed tight to her ear. The street exhaled. Inside, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from the HOA management office I'd contacted weeks earlier, confirming in writing that my lot was excluded and always had been. I forwarded it to myself, printed it, and added it to the folder. By afternoon, a notice appeared on my door anyway. It was generic, unsigned, and incorrect. I smiled because paper cuts both ways. This was no longer about a misunderstanding. It was about accountability, and the trail she was leaving led straight to it. The notice sat on my door like a dare. No letterhead, no authority, just bold warnings and imaginary fines. I took photos, logged the time, and slipped it into my folder. Documentation isn't dramatic, but it wins quietly. By noon, I had an email drafted to the management company, the board president, and the city liaison, attaching proof, timestamps, and the voicemail they'd already left me. I didn't accuse. I asked for confirmation. Confirmation arrived faster than expected. The management company replied with a single sentence that mattered. My property was not subject to HOA rules, enforcement, or fees. They apologized for the confusion and asked for the name of the person posting notices. I forwarded the message to my printer and made 3 copies. She returned that evening, emboldened by momentum she thought she still had. She told me the board agreed. I was non-compliant, and that I needed to remove my truck immediately. I handed her the email. She skimmed it, scoffed, and said emails didn't override community decisions. I pointed out the sender's title and signature. I asked if she wanted to call them together. Her confidence cracked. She shifted tactics again, insisting that even if I wasn't governed, I was benefiting from HOA amenities and therefore owed cooperation. I explained assessments require covenants, not vibes. Amenities don't create obligations without contracts. She accused me of exploiting a loophole. I said I was honoring a boundary. Neighbors lingered, listening. One asked if exclusions were common. I explained how developments sometimes carve out parcels, how records persist even when memory doesn't. Another neighbor admitted they'd never seen the documents. A third asked how to check their own. Knowledge spread faster than her authority. She tried to save face by reframing it as a courtesy request. I agreed to be courteous. Courtesy, however, is voluntary. Enforcement is not. The difference matters. She bristled, said she'd escalate, and warned this wasn't over. I thanked her for stopping by. That night, I received another message, this time from the board president, apologizing and asking me to disregard any prior communications. They assured me there would be no further contact. I replied with a simple acknowledgement and attached the photos of the posted notice, requesting confirmation that unauthorized enforcement would stop. The next morning, the notice was gone. So was her car. In its place, a neighbor waved and asked about my move. We talked boxes and weather and where to get good coffee. The street felt lighter. I updated my file, not because I expected another confrontation, but because preparation is a habit. Power fades when challenged by facts, and it evaporates when witnesses learn how it works. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I proved a negative with patience. Some battles are loud. This one was quiet, and that's why it worked. Silence settled in, but it wasn't the end. It was the pause before consequences. A few days later, a certified letter arrived, addressed to me but stamped with HOA letterhead. This time it was official-looking, carefully worded, and clearly written by someone trying to walk back a mistake without admitting one. They acknowledged my exclusion, affirmed no authority, and politely requested a cooperative neighborly relationship going forward. Translation. Please don't make this worse. I read it twice, then once more slowly. The letter mentioned confusion, caused by a volunteer acting in good faith. No names, no apology, just distance. I drafted a response that was factual, unemotional, and precise. I accepted their confirmation, reiterated the exclusion, and requested written assurance that no HOA representative would approach me again regarding enforcement. I also asked that my address be removed from all HOA distribution lists. Boundaries work best when they're explicit. Word traveled faster than mail. Neighbors began stopping by under friendly pretenses, asking how I handled it, what documents mattered, and whether exclusions could be challenged. I shared what I knew without advising anyone to rebel. This wasn't about stirring conflict. It was about clarity. People deserve to know who governs them and who doesn't. The woman with the clipboard didn't return, but her influence lingered. I heard she was frustrated, embarrassed, and convinced I'd undermined community order. I hadn't. Order depends on legitimacy. Without it, rules are just noise. A week later, a new HOA notice went up at the entrance, reminding residents that enforcement would be handled exclusively by authorized parties. It was vague but telling. Then came the knock, not her. The board president. He introduced himself, apologized plainly, and admitted they'd relied on outdated assumptions. He asked if I'd consider attending a meeting to explain exclusions, so others could understand. I declined politely. Education is valuable, but participation implies consent. He nodded, understanding more than he said. After he left, I stood on my porch and watched the street. Kids rode bikes. Someone grilled. Life continued. Power struggles fade when they're denied an audience. I didn't need to win publicly. I'd already won privately on paper, where it counts. That evening, I labeled my folder and slid it into a drawer. Not as a trophy, but as insurance. The lesson wasn't about defying an HOA, it was about knowing your position before someone else defines it for you. Noise invites reaction. Facts invite resolution. The next chapter of this story wasn't confrontation. It was coexistence. And that, strangely enough, was the most satisfying outcome of all. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood settled into a rhythm that finally included me without conditions. No notes on my door. No surprise visits. Just the ordinary sounds of people living near one another. The absence of conflict felt earned, not accidental. When authority is corrected, it rarely announces its retreat. It simply stops showing up. I finished unpacking, planted a small tree near the driveway, and learned which neighbors waved back. A few quietly thanked me for standing firm. One admitted they'd been fined incorrectly before and never questioned it. Another said they'd requested their own records after hearing what happened. I didn't encourage rebellion. I encouraged reading. Paperwork changes everything. The woman who yelled on move-in day became a story people told with lowered voices. Not a villain, just a cautionary tale about confidence unchecked by knowledge. I never spoke her name. I didn't need to. The proof spoke for itself, and silence did the rest. Control loses oxygen when it can't provoke a response. What stayed with me wasn't the confrontation, but how close I came to surrendering out of convenience. It would have been easy to comply, to repaint, to park elsewhere, to pay fees that weren't mine. That's how small overreaches become normal. Not through force, but through fatigue. Saying no required preparation, patience, and the willingness to be uncomfortable for a moment. One afternoon, the management company emailed again, confirming my address had been fully removed from their system. I saved it, printed it, and filed it away. Closure doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like a checkbox ticked, a drawer closed, a breath released. Standing in my driveway at sunset, I thought about how ownership isn't just legal. It's psychological. It's knowing where you stand when someone points and shouts rules at you. It's the confidence to ask, according to whom, and wait for the answer. Most people never do, and that's why these moments repeat. I didn't beat the HOA. I proved I wasn't part of it. That distinction matters. Victory implies a fight. This was a correction. A boundary redrawn with calm lines and recorded facts. The neighborhood didn't change. My place in it did. If there's a takeaway, it's simple. Before you follow a rule, know where it comes from. Before you accept authority, confirm it exists. And before you raise your voice, check your documents. The quietest proof is often the strongest. Move-in day taught me that belonging isn't granted by someone with a clipboard. It's defined by ownership, clarity, and the courage to stand still while someone else shouts themselves into silence.